it's sort of awkward that the example that we're given, but it is because it blew up so much, is this should we say George Floyd event? Like that's how I'm going to describe it because I just see it as part of the spectacle. The reason that I wrote about this one straight away is because unlike the other ones, like Greta Thunberg was relatively harmless. It was just annoying. And then I was thinking about myself today. I was like, there's probably tons of events that I've forgotten. And one has just literally popped into my mind. Like, do you remember Extinction Rebellion? We had about 2 weeks of Extinction Rebellion. And in those 2 weeks, that was the single most important thing that ever happened ever to anyone who was commenting about it. And I imagine the same people who were taking part in that and were also the same people who were taking part in the Greta Thunberg, they're taking part in this thing at the moment. And you can strip away what it's called or what they're doing, and you can just apply you can apply like an abstraction. You could just call it an abstraction of status. Like it's something that just increases your status, and it's a signal. And I'm not going into with this essay. I'm not actually trying to go near the whole virtue signaling thing because I just think that's I think that's kind of been and gone, that whole language of like virtue signaling, blah, 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 SJWs, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, it's bigger than that because it's to do with status and it's to do with what René Girard called mimesis. Like people copy each other. And it's so basic that it's sort of, when I wrote the article that came out in the space of an hour, like it just banged it out and it just kept flowing and flowing. And I was like, yeah, this is how I see it. And of course, people disagree because they want to, that it's the sunk cost fallacy, right? It's the idea that you put time and effort into something, so therefore it must be right. And if you attack people who've sunk their time and their energy into something, and you say, actually, I don't think this is what this is at all, they just get angry. And all the it's the same as anything when you attack people on this. The retaliations are never concise or articulate. They're always ad hominem. Like any attack on this, any fair criticism on this is racism. Any fair criticism on Extinction Rebellion is, let's say, like a pro-capitalist libertarian thing. Any criticism of like Greta Thunberg is like bullying or peer pressure or being mean. And for me, this actually just comes down to very relatively simple, sort of almost like game theory status dynamics, which is it's really difficult to point to the origin of where things start to flow, right? So you have this event that happens, and for some reason, out of all the other times this has happened, and same with climate change, like there's 1,000 things we could pick out of climate change to say, oh my God, look how bad it is. But for some reason, one of them just clicks the right buttons and it starts to flow. In the same way that there is 1,000, or if not probably 1,000,000 Greta Thunbergs out there that we could have found and said, look, this kid's amazing. Like if you go back to the 70s and the 90s and the 80s, there's like always this young girl at some point, obviously a different name, who is pointing out the same climate change injustices the whole time. And it is a repetition. And like the thing with this is it's just, for me, it comes down to a simple idea of status, which is you see a load of people agreeing with something, and unless you agree with it, you're going to become alienated. And it's simply, for me, it's simply that simple, that people are partaking in this because really, for this, it's a strange combination because COVID happened, and I wrote like a short follow-up called like I think it was hunger for nothing. So it's like everyone sort of had cabin fever at that point in time, and basically what you're seeing is the moralism and ethical standpoint of these protests overrode, or it overrides people's risk with regards to health and safety. So it's undeniable that in about 2 or 3 weeks' time, there is going to be one of the sharpest spikes in COVID-19. And we'll probably have to have 2 or 3 more weeks of sitting indoors because people went out. And, this is just one of those big hypocrisies where you say like, well, hang on, how come you can go out and do these protests when for weeks and weeks and weeks, we've been sat inside, trying to stay healthy. So it's like, it's proof that of where society's priorities lie. And it's proof that there is sort of starting to form a hierarchy of like, okay, so social justice is top, and then there's public health. But then what about this? And then what about this? And things start to slide into place. And it seems to me that public health is probably near the bottom. But this, for me, I just want to make it clear, this has nothing to do, for me, like, this isn't an attack on George Floyd. This isn't an attack on Black Lives Matter, anything like that. I'm not interested in the politics. I don't care. For me, this is another event in a long line of events in the spectacle, which can all just be, it's almost like a Kantian distinction where like, whatever the name or the aesthetic of the event is, That's phenomena. Wipe that away, and behind it, you have the same event that's just gravitating the same people towards it time and time again. The people who just get caught up in groupthink, who get caught up in mimesis, who get caught up in like what Gustave Le Bon called the crowd, like the understanding that if there's a herd, and the only reason there's a herd, or Nietzsche called it the herd, Heidegger called it the they, spectacle. There's 1,001 names for it. But for that to be a reality, there has to be the kind of people that will always gravitate towards that. And most of these people aren't thinking; they are just simply following the herd. And it's empty thought to say like, oh, they're such sheep. But at the end of the day, it's just another event which attracts the herd, and that's sort of a depressing answer, because it's like, oh, it's nothing new. It's like, it's nothing new. And but once again, like they've sort of got you in a stranglehold, because it's a moralistic and ethical and, shall we say, like socio-political signal of being good. Then inherently there's like a collective understanding that if you say anything other than anything that isn't positive about it, then you're against it and you're bad. And that is what I would call like the Disneyfication of society. And it was one of the things I was talking to John Michael Greer about the other day, where we have this idea now that if there's a tiny bit of something bad in someone, or someone has done one tiny bad thing at some point, they're entirely bad, right? You can't have someone who's like written, hundreds of great books. Like, I don't know, take for instance, it happened on the left with Slavoj Žižek. He's written so many good books, but then he begins this like criticism of immigration, saying, well, actually, no, like we understand each other as cultures, but actually we do need the divisions. And it's like, right, we can't have him at all anymore. And that's the pure Disneyfication of culture. Is like, if you just criticize one tiny thing which everyone else considers good, then you're instantly bad, and everything else you say is bad. And that's how the Overton window contracts, because all that means is, if the Overton window is the window of what's considered acceptable to speak about within a society, then whatever is defined as good is like, you're fine to talk about that, you're fine to talk about that. And as soon as you go the other way, it isn't that you actually extend the Overton window that way, you're just completely outcast, and you're just deemed like, no, that person's horrible, we can't even speak about them, we can't even talk to them anymore. And I mean, most people are relatively aware of this, and it seems to me that if you get a chance to speak to people on an individual or even a small group level, then it's fine. Like, most people will usually listen. But as soon as you start going above sort of 3 or 4 people, forget it. Like, you can drag a horse to water, but it won't drink. Like, people just don't want to know. People don't want to think. And that's sort of the gist of the argument. I mean, I include some reasons why social media exacerbates the problem, and I include the fact that it's what really is the problem is that actually our time's being compressed. So
dopamine reward systems.
But we're being taught to live in increasingly smaller presents. So like the present of the Greta Thunberg thing was like, that was one present from start to finish. Now she's gone. She's not coming back. Start to finish, because she didn't keep up. If you noticed, she's still going on about climate change. And if you go on, it's amazing. If you go on Greta Thunberg's Twitter, and I urge everyone who's listening to do this, go on it and look at her tweets, and look at, she's still posting about climate change, but they seem like they're from something like the 1970s now. That's how old they seem, right? Because we're taught like, right, that event's done. Unless you keep up, you're an alienated, sort of reactionary, old hack, archaic. And it's like, but we're taught to just stay in the present. And when that present's over, there is no connection anymore. There's no history. There's no formation. It's like present. And they're just getting smaller and smaller. And dopamine reward systems basically exacerbate this effect by basically just teaching you to exist. Your whole existence rides on just waiting for the next tiny little buzz of proof that you're alive, basically.